Good to see you. I'd like to say thank you to all of the people who helped on Friday. We were kind of thinking, is this something that's a need or not? And mainly the thrift store deals with agencies. Like we supply about 10 shelters for battered women. We work with 2 orphanages. We work with an organization which teaches men coming out of prison a trade so they can go and work. The trade they have isn't working for them. And we have, so usually we just work with the people who are helping other people. And so we don't do our own vetting and stuff like that. But we thought for this we would just try serving the community directly. And we had, it's really hard to tell because at times it was a little crowded, but about 200 maybe. And people were just had tears in their eyes. They needed it. And sometimes you hear stories about they drove up in their Escalade and no. These people who came, by and large, mainly were people who were struggling. I mean, their car needed a paint job. Their windows were down because they didn't have air conditioning, and they were really struggling. And many of them had jobs, but not really making it. And so we were glad for people who there is no assistance to give them a leg up and are struggling. And it was a very successful day. And so thank you for helping. Thank you for bringing stuff in for us to give away your stuff. Your closet never looked so good. All right, so it was a worthwhile project. Last few weeks, we've been talking about God transforming different areas of our life. We've talked about our physical life, our spiritual life, our mental life last week. This week, he wants to also transform our emotions. We have to learn how to deal with how we feel. And emotional health is a big deal because what did I say first service? It's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
We find that it's the decision-making part of our personality and our personhood. And people say, not me, I'm totally analytical, and I'm an engineer, and I'm a doctor, whatever. What they found out was when highly analytical people damaged their right brain, their creative brain, their feeling brain, they could write out the list. What is it, Ben Franklin's pros and cons, and down the list they go. They could tell you everything about the decision. They could tell you what the cost was each way. They could not make the decision. As it turns out, one of the reasons that God has put an awful lot of information for you and I in his owner's manual about feelings is that's where we make our decisions, is in the feeling side. And if you look at a car ad, does it tell you how many cents per mile that car is going to cost you over the lifetime? No. It says you get a beautiful woman or a handsome guy. What's that got to do with cars? It's a feeling. So our decisions are made with feelings. In fact, I was talking to a guy, and they were selling motorhomes, and he said, we don't sell the motorhome. We take them on a journey beside a river with the camp stove out and sitting under the awning. People are buying motorhomes, for crying out loud, on feelings. I could buy a bubble wrap on feelings, but a motorhome, all your decisions are made on feelings. So God has said, let's look at feelings, and that's what we're going to do this morning. Jesus had feelings. He was passionate. He said, you must love the Lord with all your heart, your feelings, all your soul, your whole being, your mind, and all your strength. He wants us to have a passionate relationship with him, not just this head knowledge. He wants us to really be involved at the deep levels with him.
Well, so when we start looking at emotions, not only did Jesus have emotions, but God also has emotions. That's right, David. God's a man, and he has emotions. He absolutely has emotions. So we have to start with that understanding because I think we tend to forget that. We were created in his image, and a very integral part of being a human being is emotion. I mean, that's what separates us from every other species on this planet. What separates separates us from, we can reproduce things like organs and we can grow these things in labs, but we can't grow emotions. We can't reproduce emotions. And that's because I think they're a very divine thing that God created, and they're very specific to human beings. So we have to remember, if we were created in his image, as it says in Genesis, if we were created in that image, then he has to have them as well. And not only does he have emotions, but he has powerful, passionate emotions. And I realized this firsthand when I was going through a Bible study, and for weeks and weeks and weeks, each devotion each morning opened up with a prayer of, give me your heart, Lord. Let me see what you see in this world. And they were all prayers similar to that. And I remember just at some point, I was getting to the point where just injustice was sitting in me so terribly. I was so just overwhelmed by it. I couldn't even watch the news because I would just become angered at the injustice. And even small injustices really bothered me. And I remember actually taking it up with David, and I was telling him, I'm like, man, I feel like I'm Jesus in the synagogues, wanting to flip over tables. It really bothered me. And then I told him about that prayer where I was asking for God to show me his way, and what it did was just powerful, powerful emotions. So God has emotions too. Just like us, he created us in his image. He knows what you're feeling. He knows what they're like. He created them in you.
In fact, when we talked about those books, I said you can't preach for 6 or 8 weeks after you read these books. You have to be careful living out your feelings, where your feelings are sourced, and how you respond to them. That's what God is saying, is that you have to understand your feelings and understand it's a gift from God. Guys, we're actually wired so we don't feel much. The second or third month, by the way, we get hit. The male fetus gets a wash of testosterone, which literally wipes out most of the estrogen in our thing. So that wires our brain completely different than a girl. And you can put someone in a functional MRI, and you can say this is a girl brain, this is a guy brain. That's how different they are. So how do we say these are from God? Women feel it so much, but you have to remember that yes, it's in the image of God. Yes, God has emotions and everything else, but it got a little messed up when the whole sin entering the world thing happened. If you remember on that event, that's when first anxiety started to come in. A whole bunch of things come in. God's coming down, and him and Adam would talk every night, and how about them bulls, and so talk about daily stuff. He comes down this night, and Adam, where'd you go? Adam says, you're kidding. I don't have any clothes on. Who told you didn't have any clothes? And of course, Adam manned up, and he said, that woman you gave me, she and
I don't think that's how this story goes.
how'd that work? We know how it worked. As soon as God left the garden that evening, there was a humdinger of a family discussion. So anxiety was brought in, anger was brought in, fear was brought in, all of those emotions which are feelings. So yes, we have feelings that come from God, but we also experience feelings as a result of the damage that was done when sin entered the world. So, but those negative feelings actually can help you. If you feel pain, that's not a real fun thing, but it certainly grabs your attention and says, look after this part of your body. You stub your toe in the middle of the night, and your toe becomes the focus of your life for about 10 minutes. And so sometimes negative feelings say you need to pay attention to this. So all of those things, and we're taught as men not to feel stuff. I mean, first of all, we're hardwired not to feel stuff, but we're also taught boys don't cry. Okay. We're just taught and schooled, but also hardwired to not do feelings. So we struggle with this whole deal.
Now, when you're dealing with emotions, there are two extremes, and men and women tend to really embody these two extremes almost. But you really need to avoid going to these extremes. And the one is emotionalism. All that matters is how I feel. And I'm sure I've been in those situations where something's happened to me, and all rationale has been just thrown out the window, and everything I'm doing, saying, participating in, whatever it is that day, all has to do with how I feel. Forget what I should be doing. Forget what rationale tells me. I am just mixed up in that emotion. And women tend to do that. We're very emotional creatures. We were created that way. And we tend to go to that end of the spectrum where we just throw out all the other tools God has given us, all the rationale, all of the other things that we can use, our friends, our community. We throw all of that advice out the window and we just run on those emotions. And you want to be careful that you don't go too far that way. Emotions are good, but they're not meant to control everything that you're doing. And then on the flip side of that, you have emotions don't matter at all, or emotions don't matter at all.
They don't.
See?
What's the problem? we tend to discount emotions, but you have to remember God complained throughout the Bible, throughout the owner's manual. He said, you guys are worshiping me with just your lips. You're just going through the motions. You have no passion, no feelings for me. And try that on your wife. Yeah, I love you. You know, but God says, you are not feeling or experiencing me. And he's complaining about that. Between the two, Stoicism, where feelings don't matter, in fact, they're discouraged, and hyper feeling, there has to be a blend. In fact, gentlemen, you can write this down. No, you won't have to. Your wife will remind you every day for the next 30 days. We tend to be a blend of people. And you'll notice that you've married about your diametric opposite. I stay up to 1, 2, 3. Last night I was still up at 5. My wife goes to bed at 9. And she is a creative, artistic, musical person. I sing in the key of Q blunt, and I can only draw right angles and graphs and primary colors. She knows sage like aqua and turquoise and all this. What? It's blue. All 30 shades, it's blue. And so we mix people tend to differ from the person we married. Here's the truth. Gentlemen, you do not understand a problem in depth until you talk to your spouse or your partner. And I do not understand what's going on in the church. I have to talk to the staff, many of whom are ladies, except for me. And so they bring a perspective to the table that I am totally unable to see until all of the information is around the table. The ladies do not bring all of the information to the table. The gentlemen do not bring all the information to the table. You have to respect that they see and experience things you will never experience. Look, they got 6 vocal centers in their brain, okay? Just thought I'd tell you, if you ask them to share, they'll share, and share, and share, and share. In fact, if they have a stroke, they got 5 more speech centers. They won't even miss a beat. Guy gets a stroke, he never says another word for the rest of his life. So, they're just different. And you have to hear each other, and if you're in a committee or a group, you have to respect the different perspectives that God has created us with. And so, why did he make so many different people? Well, number one, he has a weird sense of humor, but number 2, he wants us to live in community and communicate.
Now, when you're trying to avoid those extremes, the best tool I found is prayer, but I found that the way I was brought up, prayer was very rehearsed. I was taught to memorize prayers, and I used them time and time again, and to this day I can recite a prayer, and if I get in a bind, I start reciting those prayers. They are just deep into this mind, ingrained into it. But what happens with that memorization or just repeating what I had learned is that you start losing that sense of feeling with it. And there have been times where the memorized prayers I have really brought forth to God in a lot of emotion or a lot of power, but they tend to kind of plateau. And, I'll look to actually the book of Psalms, because God gave us the book of Psalms to help us understand those emotions, to help us pray. I mean, David says things in there like, he says, Lord, rise up in your anger, stand against my enemies. Lord, defend me because I am right. I have done no wrong. I mean, that's not David just saying, dear God, defend me. That's power, defend me. I can see him shaking his fist at God, defend me, I've done no wrong. He says, pay attention to me, answer me. Those are heartfelt prayers. So a lot of times I tend to go back and look at the book of Psalms because I think that there's a lot in there and there's a lot of emotion running through the people who wrote the Psalms that can help you with navigating through those emotions. Now, I like to say, I think David would agree, why do we have to manage our emotions? Why is that important to us to manage our emotions? And, I want to tell you, I'm good at emotions. I've got feelings down. I'm good. Like, gut feelings are my specialty. And he can even attest to this because there's been times where he's come to me and said, hey, what's your gut on this? Or he'll say that to, the ladies in the office, what's your gut on this? Because we tend to have good guts, don't we, ladies? I mean, we really do. And I look at it as a gift from God. I think that God gave that to me for a reason and that I shouldn't ignore it. But the problem with it is that feelings do often tend to be unreliable. And as good as that gut may be, or as good as you think you've got it down, what happens is that everything else that's going on in our very busy heads, all of that other information can start filtering into that gut, and then you end up with a jaded gut. You'll say, oh, don't trust him, don't trust him. And maybe I'm saying, oh, that's my gut. My gut just tells me not to trust him. But then I'm also taking into account 5 years ago, we had a little tiff, and that's all playing in there. So then my gut starts to get jaded. And it's real difficult to discern between what's true gut, that I'm listening to God and using that gift, or what's kind of being jaded with some of my own emotions, my own feelings that are driving that, because we're very emotionally driven people.
Second reason is because we don't want to be manipulated. You have to understand your emotions, or you will be manipulated. King Solomon, David's son, when he was king, put together a book of wisdom, and he said, like an open city with no defenses is the man with no check on his feelings, or a person without self-control is defenseless as a city. If you do not have an understanding of your feelings, that is one of the battlegrounds. We said that your mind, there's a competition for the way you think. If you think a certain way, it's what I wasn't really joking with Teresa when I said, if you read that book, you're not going to preach for a few weeks. Why? Because you think a certain way. It makes you feel a certain way, and you begin to respond a certain way with great strength. But if you are not, there's nothing wrong with that feeling, but if you do not understand your feelings and have control over them, it says you're just like a defenseless city. You're open to the old nature comes up and it's going to do stuff, and you're not really in control. It does what it wants. Along comes old Slewfoot, and he says this and that, and you're not in control of your emotions, and at that time your emotions are in control of you. It's just like having no protection or no defenses. Satan walks in and dances all over you. Peter says he hung around with Jesus for a few years. He was the guy who would walk into a room mouth first. But anyways, he said, be controlled and alert. It's strange that would be him that would say that. Be controlled and alert. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone who devour. He's looking for weak spots, and this is one of the places where he finds them.
And it's so much a part of who we are and what we do that I think Satan is relentless when it comes to emotions. I mean, it's an easy, simple way to get your attention somewhere else other than where it should be, and I think he uses it and uses it and uses it. So you got to be careful because he's on the prowl for that. Another reason we want to learn to manage our emotions is because we want to please God. And I really like this one because I'm a people pleaser. I like to please people. I actually grew up in a restaurant, and from the time I was just a wee little tot, I was running around, doing my customer service thing, pleasing people, had a smile on my face, getting them what they need. So that kind of just became a part of who I am. So pleasing somebody is like great. I'm like, awesome, I can please God, I please everybody else. That's what I do. But see, the problem is, and Paul actually warns against this in Romans. He says to be controlled by human nature results in death, but to be controlled by the Spirit results in life and peace. Those who obey their human nature cannot please God. See, I'm relying on my human nature to please people. And I think that those same tools, or you want to think that those same tools are how you please God. And Paul's telling you, God's like, no, that's not how you go about it. You know, his love is so different than what we can even fathom in our human confines. I mean, his love's not, it's not limited by our human conditions. It's not, you know, it's almost impossible for us to understand if we stay within the human limitations. It's something much more, much outside of that. So, you know, Paul is telling the Romans, he's telling you, he's telling me that, you know, you have to allow the Spirit to take control. And that's the way you go about pleasing God, not by the means that you're used to.
Now, there's another reason God has written so much in our owner's manual here about our feelings and our emotions. And that is because he wants us to succeed in life. And the truth is, we know now what he said is true. We spent a lot of money figuring out that, yeah, God knew what he was talking about. And they do run tests. And they found out that a team, equally competitive and equally skilled, if one team has a higher EQ, or if one team has a better understanding of their own emotions and how they feel, and can understand how you feel, and then know the appropriate response, if you have that high EQ, they will outperform a high IQ team, a sharp team, by over 20%. And they do that over and over and over again. God knows, and that's why he put it in here for his children, for you and for me. If we understand our feelings and others' feelings and respond appropriately, we have now found out what he was talking about. And again, please mail me the money. I'll tell you the answer. Quit spending all this money. It's in here. It's in the manual. You have a better chance of succeeding. If you don't understand those kind of things, you get not the results and the life that God wants you to have.
Okay. So now we know why we want to do it, so how do we go about doing it? And the very, very first thing that you need to do is you need to name it. Now, two real simple words, and probably much more simply said than done. We need to name it. And especially, I think, for women, we like to talk and share and go through all these emotions, all these different emotions, like we're angry and we're happy and we're sad, and we're like, in one 10-minute conversation, we could have 15 different feelings, and we feel all of those. So we like to run through a lot of them, but you really have to get down to the bottom of what you're feeling, and that takes a little bit of digging. I'm a Dr. Phil watcher. I know David doesn't watch Dr. Phil, but I watch Dr. Phil, and you know, he always has these people on there that are like, I'm angry. They're angry about everything. They're angry at their ex, they're angry at their kids, they're angry. And he always says that anger is not anger. Anger is hurt, frustration, or fear. You kind of have to take a step back and take a look at what is causing me to feel this. Why do I have this feeling? What is it? It's not just anger. And even if you have a lot of feelings like we do as women, then take the time to actually identify each and every one of them. Whether it's 1 or 15 of them, you have to stop and then start digging and figure out where that's coming from.
I think this is one of the places where women seem to have an advantage. We don't deal much with feelings. I had a feeling once, and I remember it. And but as far as identifying what we're feeling, when the recession hit and we had to tighten down, and we made a bunch of difficult decisions, moving staff and cutting hours and a whole bunch of stuff, and we were at it for hour after hour after hour. And Sherry and I were talking the whole day about this. When we got done, I think she did this on purpose just to laugh at me, but she said, "How do you feel?" And she meant, during all of these tough decisions, how did I feel about all of this? And of course, I was a typical man, and I said, the only thing that brought me out of it was her hysterical laughing. I can feel and I can think, but I can't think about how I feel. That's not going to work. So when we come to this name it, we have to at least understand what we're feeling before we can understand what we're naming. And there's a couple things to help us out. What am I really feeling? This is irritation. What is it? And you know, what happens when you stop a small child from doing what they want to do? They kiss you and love you and say thank you so much for your care and loving kindness and taking that dangerous toy away from you. And
I don't recall that.
they scream and yell and throw a temper tantrum. Why? They didn't get their way. You know what I found out? That little character trait lives on as we get older. We don't throw temper tantrums, but we get frustrated and angry. And sometimes you have to challenge that feeling. What triggered this? Why am I feeling this? What am I feeling? What is this really all about?
And when you challenge it, you know, we live in a world where it's okay to feel what we feel. And it is. It really is. But we're constantly being told that it's okay, feel how you feel. You should, you know, don't worry about how others should tell you how to feel. And you're right. But at the same time, it's also okay to question it. You know, you have to question it a little bit and say, what I'm feeling, is it really right? Is it accurate? You got to challenge what it is that's going on. I mean, my husband and I had a situation where he couldn't do something because of work. And I was just really agitated with it, very, very agitated by the whole situation. And so much so that I started thinking, well, why is that? You know, what is driving these feelings, these passionate feelings? Because, boy, I was just really agitated with them. And I started digging back a little bit, and my husband and I were talking about it, and, you know, it went back to my childhood. And it was a situation where my parents, they were workaholics. And they worked all the time. And I was told as a child over and over and over again that, no, we're too busy. You know, we can't go to this event, this sporting event. We can't go to that. And that really bothered me. And that's what was driving this thing with my husband. But if I had not taken the time to stop and sit back and question, what is making me so passionate about something so silly, I wouldn't have figured out where that was actually coming from. And, you know, my husband's taking the brunt of something that happened long before I knew him. So you have to make sure that you push a little bit and find out where that feeling's coming from, why it exists in you.
We have difficulty being honest. And so David, when he was feeling stuff, he would say, cross-examine me, test my motives. And so when we talk about the fact that we're angry because we didn't get our way, that's not self-evident all the time. We're angry because they're doing it the wrong way, which is not your way. So you have to challenge your feelings and examine it, and sometimes you have to talk to God. Why is this going on? What Teresa is talking about is sometimes you have something in your past, and you can tell when it's hit. You will have a small stimulus, like him saying, I got to work tonight, and you get a strong reaction. When she says she was irritated, she means screaming, yelling, kitchen plate, knife throwing, irritated.
Anything that anybody saw.
What causes a large reaction from a little stimulus? And the answer is, you're not dealing with what you're dealing with. You're dealing with something else. And so that gives you a chance to say, whoa, that was strong. Challenge the feeling. Where did it come from? She's saying when she challenged the feeling, it actually came from her childhood. And poor Eric, I was visiting him in the hospital after that, and he was glad that she worked that through. But we all have things. Challenge the feeling and be honest, and sometimes ask God to help you. Ask 3 questions. What's the real reason that I'm feeling this? Is it a true feeling? In other words, if I'm angry at you for doing it your way and not doing it my way, that's not integrity. That's selfishness and a control issue. So it's not a legitimate, true feeling. Is this feeling helping or hurting me if I'm feeling and acting this way? Now, you were in a restaurant. Come on. Tell us all the truth. Tell us all the truth. When someone screamed and yelled at you, made you take their plate back and go, what happened behind the walls when the cook was there?
We'll never tell you that.
Some of our behaviors aren't getting what we want, okay? Is this behavior getting me what I need to have?
And going back just for a moment to the true, because I think that I think this is really a female thing. I don't see men doing this, but what we tend to do is when we're in a situation, we let our minds go crazy, like crazy. we take something that happened and we can read a lot into a conversation that wasn't there, and we start going down these little rabbit trails of all these scenarios that we have in our head. Well, maybe she said that to me because of this, and maybe this, and then maybe they're getting divorced, and that's why. And we carry on. So then you end up with a feeling about something that really doesn't even that didn't even happen. I mean, we have feelings about situations that haven't even happened. I mean, that's what we do in our minds. So you have to make sure that, first of all, it's just, we do. I know how I would feel in case that happens.
Yes, if that ever happens.
I'm prepared now. But you have to make sure it's even a true feeling, or that you even have the right to feel about what's going on, and whether you've, actually taken the course and figured out that this is something that you should really be feeling. So I think that's part of challenging it too.
And gentlemen, this is something you absolutely have to respect. We talked about the fact that you can tell whether this is a woman's brain or a man's brain. They're just wired differently. They operate differently. And they attach feelings to every incident. So when the incident happens again, all the feelings that's attached to that come back. We can't even remember what they're talking about, and they're passionate about something we didn't even know happened. They are connected directly. Their corpus callosum, which runs between the two halves of the brain, is 25% larger than yours. They move stuff around from half to half at a speed and at a volume that is not available to men. Thank you, Lord. I appreciate that. And everything's connected, feelings. And so we can say, don't ever say this to your wife if she has a knife in her hand. Get over it, okay? We have the choice to just get over it. They absolutely cannot. And so you can say, well, don't feel like that. Yeah, good luck with that. How's that working for you? Dr. Phil will explain that one. You must respect the fact that she's entirely different wired than you are. So when we challenge these things, be careful about applying your feelings to another person. So just challenge yourself. And I would recommend don't challenge your wife. Just a word to the wise, okay? Just a thought. Each of us need to challenge our own feelings.
Yeah, translation, we're scientifically smarter is what you're saying. All right, so after you've had a chance to name it and question it a little bit, then you got to figure out how to tame it. And that's probably perhaps the hardest part. Now, there's two ways to tame it. Either you change it or you challenge it. And yes, I said change it. And I can hear myself right now, at least 5 million arguments in my lifetime of, I can't change how I feel. This is how I feel. That's what we do, right? Changing our feelings just seems like, I can't help how I feel about that. I can't tell you how many times I've said that. But, in the book of Philippians, it says your attitude should be that should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. And sometimes we just get to the point where our feeling, what we're doing is wrong. And we have to take a look at it and say, okay, I really don't have to continue to be hurt about this. I need to change how I'm feeling. I need to change it to something more Christ-like. Yeah, there are feelings sometimes that they are just so difficult that you have to get to the point where you are willing to actually change it. We want to say that you are not able to do that you can't change my feelings. This is how I feel about it. But you can. You can't change somebody else's feelings. However, you are in control of your own. So you do have the ability to change it.
While we're on this, when men process this kind of stuff, when women process it, they have to talk about it, okay? Wife, go find another woman and talk about it, okay? By the way, if a man keeps his eyes straight ahead, looking at another person and gets into a long conversation, it raises chemical levels and he will get tired, okay? When a woman does the exact same thing, she becomes energized. So if you try talking to your husband for a long time and he has to look at you, a man has to let his eyes go all over the place or he'll fall asleep. So we're that different that what energizes our wife puts us to sleep. Now, the other thing that you have to respect is when a man works through this process, he likes to go into his cave, leave him alone, Don't go in the cave, or you'll find there's a bear in there. And you're always surprised at the reaction. Like, I just wanted to help him through it. Well, then, leave him alone. He'll come out when he's worked it out. Whereas a woman has to talk and talk and talk and talk. And the guy, the last thing he wants to do is talk, and especially if it's a feeling. It's the only one he's had this week. Leave him alone. So respect the fact that we have to process it, but it's going to be a different process as we go through it.
I think there's actually times where my husband has said, "Are we talking about that again?" Yep. Yep, we are. I'm not done with it yet. Now, and the other thing you can do to tame it is you can channel it. I'm sorry. You can channel it. Now, this is probably a little bit easier than changing it, but still, it can be very effective especially when you have like deep hurts. I just read a book by Christine Kane, and her childhood was very full of abuse and molestation, and some terrible, terrible things happened to her. On top of being adopted, and just really not a great upbringing for her. But she has taken that pain that was so deep and so just driven into her body. She has taken that pain, and she actually now is a huge advocate for freeing women from sex trafficking. So she's taken that and channeled it somewhere. She has passion, she has drive, she has a very successful ministry. Sometimes our greatest pains end up being our greatest ministries, and especially when you're in, when I go around and I'm hearing stories from other pastors and people, a lot of times that's exactly what it is it was some great deep pain that has created a passion to do something positive with it. So if you can't change it, many times you can channel it.
I think the best example is MAD, Women Against Drunk Drivers. Rather than having their life continually be destroyed by the loss, they turn it into a passion and do some good. How do we make these changes? This is one of those things where you don't focus on the problem, you focus on God. I've hidden your word in my heart so that I won't sin against you, so that I won't get out of line, so that I won't say and do things that I should not do. Jesus was saying it's what's inside you. Therefore, put God inside of you. And what's the result of putting the Spirit of God in you? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That's the believer. And you can't get there by focusing on the problem. You have to focus on God. Would you stand with me? Our Heavenly Father, you have placed within us the power to overcome any obstacle, to be victorious over any struggle, to live in a place where greater is your Spirit that lives in us than anything that we face in this world. The awesome power that slammed into Jesus Christ, who had been dead for 3 days, warmed up the flesh, stood him up, kicked away the 3-ton door, walked him out alive, well and breathing. That's the Spirit that lives in us. Help us to walk with the confidence, knowing whatever challenge we face, we will, by your power living in us, overcome. This week, let us walk the face of the earth as victorious children of the living God. In Jesus' name, amen.